Hello, folks, and welcome back to Appalachian Intelligence. We're glad to have you guys back. Glad that you're listening. We hope you enjoyed the last episode with Ward. We had a great time with Ward Heine. We really hope that you guys check out his work. It was a great conversation. I know it was one of those stories that after it was all said and done, after it was over, I had a hard time going to sleep that night. And so I hope that everybody that listened to it had the same effect. Be sure to go check out Ward's work on Lore whenever that docuseries comes out. It's supposed to be coming out later this month, the month of March. Be sure to check him out. Be sure to follow him on all of his social media platforms. You can just type in Ward Heine, check him out just about anywhere. Today, you know who you guys host. You got Justin Kaiser. You got my man
Ryan
Ratliff. He won't say his full name. He's like a secret agent or something.
Well, I was trying to keep that off the...
And for your listening pleasure, we have another special guest with us here today. This man has been an integral part of my life for a really long time. One of my best friends in the world. This guy was QB1 my senior year of high school. He was the ace on our baseball team that we went all the way to region, but he's still the ace. This guy was one of the top 4 groomsmen, my favorite groomsmen in my wedding. Lance Compton. Lance, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, guys. I'm glad to be here. So I was telling you guys before we got started recording, you guys have just fallen in love with this podcast, what you guys are doing, stuff you're putting out. Just fantastic. So I'm tickled to death when you gave me a call and said, hey, you want to talk about some stuff? I'm nowhere near as qualified as some of the people you guys have had on to have conversations, but I've got a lot of crazy theories and a lot of, I would say I'm well read. Jack of many trades, master of none type of deal. And I would say that if I was going to describe myself, I fall right in the middle between you and Ryan. I'm not as crazy conspiracy as you are. I like some facts, but I like to dance that gray area too. So I think this will be entertaining. Have some fun here and kind of talk about some interesting things. And I've got some good stories things that have happened, not personally to me, but a couple of people with my wife who I'll never get on a camera to tell some of the stories, things she's had happen to her. But she has given me liberty to tell her stories. So I think you'll find them interesting. As I've heard Justin say a couple of times, I mean, something about this area, something about Appalachia, the people here, the culture. It's just to me better than everywhere else. I know we catch a lot of flack for our accents and our back hood and our hayseed type of ways, but it's just there's something different about this culture, and I think it's great what you guys are doing here.
Thanks, man. And by the way, our little backwoods accent had our Philadelphia fans, shout out to them. That's one of the things they love about us. So feel free to let it twang.
Yeah, I think we were checking out the stats of the show earlier today, and it gives you like locations where you have downloads, and Philly's like top 3 in the locations. So
it's awesome.
We've got a couple ratings and reviews from the Philadelphia area. So for those ratings and reviews and for pushing this podcast in the Philadelphia area, you know who you are, and we appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing. And eventually we're going to be setting up a Patreon, and we'll have some bonus content, some prizes maybe to give away, all this different stuff. So you guys that are out there pushing it, we'll make sure that you're recognized in some form.
Pay these men their money.
Lance, we're really but no, Lance, we're really excited to have you on here today. You know, I've talked to Ryan a lot about you and a lot about the conversations that we were having, mostly so he could just do his homework and get caught up. But I want to jump in today and talk. Man, I wish we would have just pressed record on the conversation that we had on the phone the other night, because I'm telling you, I was loving it. I was absolutely loving it. And in that conversation, we were talking
Can you hear me, Lance?
I can hear you. I got you. It's him.
It's Justin again. You've muted yourself.
This is the content the people are looking for right here.
You can hear us.
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing.
He's telling us to keep going. You know, I don't think you realize this is a video, bro. You're like, it shows you doing that. It shows you going, you guys keep it rolling. He doesn't care. So anyway, I know where he's wanting to go into first. And I think he was wanting to start in the Genesis 6 area. Your theory, he said you have a little bit different theory than while it's completely opposite of a guest we're supposed to have up and coming. I don't know everything in detail about y'all's conversation or the theory you put forth, so hit me with it.
Okay. Genesis 6, specifically the first 4 verses, talks about something called the Nephilim. And there's probably 100 different things. You could go on YouTube or a Reddit site, anywhere, and get, what do people think that the Nephilim are? Are they responsible for the giants? Are they responsible for the evil of mankind? Is the Nephilim the reason that we have paranormal activity going on today? And you can essentially find any type of unusual thing that's happening or unusual thing that's happened in human history, and somebody has connected it to the Nephilim in some form or fashion. And the Nephilim is an interesting thing because if you're going to, I guess, look at Genesis chapter 6 and look at things in scripture, a lot of times, sometimes people will just jump into a verse, pull it out, give you just that context of the verse, and kind of use it to manipulate it however they want to, right? I can take any scripture that I want to and make it bend any way that I want to do that. I don't think that's the right way to do things. And before I get into my theory, and I'm going to probably do a little digging in on some stuff that's going on in Genesis. We're not going to look at the Bible tonight, or in Genesis specifically, from a moral application standing that you would hear on a Sunday morning, right? That's not what I want to do. We can do that. I would love to. Hey, by all means, if you want to get into that, we want to talk about how much of a sinner I am and why I need salvation, we can do that too. No problem. But I really want to look at the Bible as a historical document, right? Because most secular colleges, most Christian colleges, most whatever, they, at least they're at some point in your liberal arts education, you're going to take some kind of Old Testament survey or New Testament survey, and you're going to look at the Bible from a historical standpoint, right? Because we know that there's some stories in there that people don't agree with, but there's also a ton of historical people that you can go in other history books and line up right with the Bible, right? So that's kind of what I want to do the next, as we kind of talk about this, is take scripture and look at it from a historical standpoint, and use this as these couple verses as that way. All right. So first of all, Nephilim there, I wrote a couple of things down here. The first 4 verses of Genesis chapter 6 talks about the sons of God coming down to the daughters of men, and then seeing the lust of the beautiful the daughters of men were, and then wanting to essentially have union with them in marriage, and then having an offspring, potentially been the Nephilim, and all these different things that kind of come from that. Before you can talk about the Nephilim, I think it's important that you identify who the sons of God are. All right, we got to get plenty of context.
Yes.
So the first, hey, he's back.
He's back.
So before we can get into the Nephilim, we have to talk about the sons of God. Now, there are usually three major interpretations of who the sons of God are. And I won't get real churchy here, and I'll be quick on this because this can get a little bit, who cares? But the first interpretation is they think it's the godly line of Seth. They call it the Sethians. Cain killed Abel, right? We know that story very well. Seth was the next one, essentially, they say, that was born to Adam and Eve, who carried on the godly line, where Cain, obviously, since he killed Abel, went down the alternate path and had, we could do a whole episode just on what I think what his descendants led to. We don't have time for that tonight. That's a whole nother conversation we can have as well. But that would consider that the evil line, instead would be considered the godly line, right? So that's one idea, is that the sons of God were the godly line from Cain. Okay, another idea is that they're simply just angelic beings, right? Most people kind of think that they're just angels, part of the third of the bad angels that fell out of heaven with Satan when he rebelled against God and tried to overthrow, and God kicked him out, and the 30 angels came with him. Although that story is not really anywhere, like specifically in in Scripture. It's talked about a little bit in Ezekiel, but that's an idea as well. They're angelic beings. The third one is that these Nephilim, or these sons of God, heroes of faith, or heroes from mythical past tyrant kings. Think Gilgamesh, think Nimrod. We might get into him tonight too. It's a whole nother character we can have a lot of fun talking about. So this could be kind of any of those three things, right? If you go back and you look at all of Scripture, the sons of God, that statement that Elohim is the Hebrew, is used 5 different times in Scriptures. Okay, and I'll get to moving pretty quick here. Genesis 6 verses 2 and 4 that we talked about. We see it in Job chapter 1 verse 6. You see it in Job chapter 2 verse 1, and you see it in Job chapter 38 verse 7. And all that's in Hebrew. Every time it's translated into Hebrew, it's Elohim. It's the same translation, written in the same context, written in the same grammatical way. So you can kind of say, well, if it's used here, 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 and here, it must all be the same thing. All right. You can also go to Daniel chapter 3 and verse 25, and it's written in Aramaic. But then if you translate the Aramaic to the Hebrew, it all relates the same way. Okay, so we see that phrase, sons of God, used 5 times in the Old Testament. Now, by taking that, it distinguishes these sons of God from Adam, right? Because Adam was technically a son of God. He created him. Yeah, makes sense. And, having that father-son relationship like Adam and God did, this is not the same type of translation. Okay, it's different from that. And if you want to get to the New Testament and find some of the same context of using this sons of God, 2 Peter writes about difficult days coming, people denying the faith, the truth about Jesus Christ. And we see Jude kind of writing some of the same stuff in a couple of his verses as well. We see it in 2 Peter. He uses context of Genesis chapter 6 and talking about Noah. We see him talking about Lot there as well, and some of the things that kind of happened with good people doing bad things. All right. So we've got
now,
two.
Hold on just a second.
Go ahead. Sorry. Yep.
So 2 Peter and the book of 2 Peter and Jude, the book of Jude, is it your understanding that they are quoting and referencing the Book of Enoch whenever they are putting that out there? And I know, the Book of Enoch, everything that we're talking about today, when you get within the church, everything is so debatable. It really causes a stir in inner circles. And the Book of Enoch is one of those things that it's not canon. No, it is not canon. And I don't think that it should be canon. But I do know that or have heard, or in my belief, I feel that Peter and Jude both quoted or referenced the Book of Enoch in some of those scriptures that we're talking about, that references the sins of the fallen angels.
Now, the Book of Enoch, if we're talking Book of Enoch, you're talking first Enoch, second Enoch, third Enoch, fourth Enoch. Which Enoch are we talking?
First Enoch.
All right,
first
because
Enoch.
the first Enoch was the one, that's the original one. That's the one that was written about 2nd or 3rd BC. And that's the one that, yes, I would agree, both Peter and Jude are referencing when they are talking about the things going on in Genesis 6. So, yeah, Book of Enoch is a hotly debated book. It is not canon in any way. I know in Ethiopia, they actually, in their Ethiopian Bible, have the Book of Enoch, but they have a whole different system of the way in which they write scripture, the way in which they look at canon. They don't actually, they kind of have things set up in sections. It's totally different than what we do. As far as just Christian Protestant faith, how we look at our scriptures is a whole different setup. So no, it's not canon, but I think it's important that we can use those references to look at scripture in any form. There's a whole bunch of other writers in scripture that use other literature to make references to the people who are writing to. Like if I'm trying to explain something to you, like I teach chemistry, I teach high school chemistry to 17, 18-year-olds, right? And they're a bunch of idiots. They all are. I was too at 17. I still am, but was definitely at 17 and 18. I think as being a good teacher, I've got to find some way in which I can relate looking at an orbital of an electron. These kids don't freaking care about an orbital of an electron, but I've got to find something that connects to what they know so they can visualize it too, right? I've got to. That's what good teachers do. If it's some TikTok dance video that they're doing or whatever it may be, or some Snapchat filter, however I can do it to make it make sense to them, that's what we do. The writers of scripture are the same way, right? They're going to use what they can have at their disposal to make things more easy for their reader to understand. And so, yeah, there's the references to the Book of Enoch there in 2nd Peter and Jude. They're used, as Moses writes in Genesis chapter 6. If it was Moses that wrote it, I think that it was. But if Moses that is the one writing about the Nephilim, which I haven't even got to yet, he didn't have to explain the Nephilim because the people that he was writing to knew exactly what the Nephilim was, right? They would have known exactly what that meant. We don't know that, but we don't have the context of it. So we have to look at what we can. Okay. So in Peter and in Jude, Peter actually encourages his reader from these well-known stories, the Book of Enoch, talks about the fall of Satan, 2nd Peter as well, and other Old Testament stories to help them relate to what he's talking about. Okay, Jude does the same thing. He talks about false teachers just like Peter does, and he kind of talks about 2 events in Jude: angels who abandon their proper home. So we're getting back to these sons of God here, right? Angels who abandon their proper home. He talks about that. If you go back to the Greek of how it was translated, it's actually angels, angelic beings, all right? And he also uses Sodom and Gomorrah. And he uses the references to Sodom and Gomorrah, again, 2 stories, very common to the reader, that showed abnormal things going on, all right? So Jude does this really well. Talks about the angels coming to these daughters, and there's abnormal sexual things going on, because obviously an angel having sex with a regular human woman, that's abnormal, right? Sodom and Gomorrah, if you know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it's not as abnormal now, but biblically at that time, things going on in Sodom and Gomorrah was abnormal. It was abnormal sexual behavior that was happening. And Jude and Peter both reference these things to say this, right? If God can deliver people from really strange perversions, which is what he did with Lot and what he did with Noah, then God can deliver the regular reader of those scriptures as well from whatever crazy things we've got going on, right? So that's why we see that relation there from the Old Testament to the New Testament. That's why we see those references there, because it allows the reader, us now, the reader then, to understand that God can pull people out of these perverse situations, all right? So, Christ in the Gospels talks about the same thing, but there are some debates here about these sons of God being angels, right? There's people who will say there's no way the sons of God could be angels, and this is the reason why. Because Jesus said in Matthew 22:30 that the angels could not have human relations, right? And if you go to Scripture, you read Matthew 22:30, it says that the angels can't have, I don't have the exact scripture off the top of my head, but essentially goes into says that there's no way that an angel can have relations, physically can't have relations with a human, right? See the same thing in Mark. It gives the same thing. But, if we look at the scriptures from a dispensational point of view and what that means, right? When I read it, that's what I take it as, right? When it says that God created the heavens and the earth, I accept that God created the heavens and the earth. Face value. If it's black, it's black. If it looks like a duck, it talks like a duck, got to be a duck, right? That's kind of how my whole theory stems from this. All right. So actual state there, if you go and read the context of Matthew 22, it talks about when we are resurrected, we are like angels, meaning that we're not going to be marrying people in heaven. So that's what Jesus is referring to there. So that's not the same thing as angels falling from their proper place of being in heaven and coming down here. That's completely countered. That's not what that's saying at all. Jude tells us the angels left their proper place in heaven. So while Christ said it's impossible for angels in heaven or people in heaven to have relations, these angels ain't in heaven, right? They have fallen from grace or fallen from their proper place. So Genesis 6, back to our initial point. I've webbed a weave here. Hopefully it's been clear. But Genesis 6 shows angels marrying humans. Okay. Just like Peter and Jude talk about these angels marrying humans. All right. So, this is a Lanciism, right? This is my theory that in heaven, there is divisions of angels, different types, cherubim, seraphims, a divine council. Shout out Michael Hauser, a divine council that have fallen from grace, right? They have fallen from their position. These are the ones that came down. The Book of Enoch calls them the Watchers. Is a reference to that. I don't know if you know that reference or have seen that. That's what we're talking about here. Those Watchers came down and then had relations with these women, and that's what the sons of God coming to the daughters of men means. So that brings us to the Nephilim, okay, which I think is something totally different. Okay, a lot of people think that the sin of these angels coming down and having relations with the daughter of men was the product. Nephilim was the product of that. I don't think that's the case. Okay. And the reason being, okay, and I'm going to tell you why. The reason being is this. Two major sentences there in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. And I'm going to pull this up because I want to read it to you to make sure I get exactly as it says in our Bible. Now, I'm going to use the King James Version. Most of the time people use ESV when they're kind of having these conversations. I'm a King James Version guy. That's what I grew up on. That's what my Papa preached out of. That's what I've always, I've got all the other ones too that I read, and they're perfectly fine. I'm not saying anything wrong with any of them. It's just the one I'm comfortable with. So verse 4 says this: the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughter of humans and who bore children unto them. Now, let me read it to you in the King James Version. Let me pull it up here. I thought I had it, but it has been pushed away. Now, verse 4, there were giants in earth in those days and also after that. So there were giants in the earth in those days and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men and bare them children. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Okay, so that's what the verse actually says. Now, two sentences there, in verse 4. Major things we need to look at, right? From a historical standpoint, looking at scripture. Okay, the first one, it says that these Nephilim were on the earth in those days and after, right? That's pretty plain language. They were there while it happened, when the sin happened, or when the sons of man came down. I think they were there before as well, and they were there also after. Okay, in two explanations here: the children from the angels, right? Most people, I think, would probably think that these Nephilim were the children from this unholy union, as a product of this unnatural union, and they're going to appeal to the Book of Enoch. Right, they're going to go right to the Book of Enoch from the 2nd and 3rd BC and talk about the Enochic traditions, in which they talk about the book of the giants, all the stuff going on. The Dead Sea Scrolls also has a whole book of giants, right? That was found with it as well, and that's all could very well be possible, right? And a lot of people have really good explanations for why that is the case. But I think when you read that and it says that they were there before and after, it's how I see that, right? So they were actually there before the angels came into the daughters of men, and they were there afterwards. Because looking at it, and it says, and also afterward, in the actual Hebrew, fits and suits how it is used in Scripture. Before the angels came down, the Nephilim were already there. After the angels had the unholy union, the Nephilim were still there. We don't see, if you go back to the Hebrew and read it, you see that in the Hebrew Bible, sentences always start with and this happened, verse 3, and this happened, verse 4, and this happened, so on and so forth. And it gives you a narrative type of reading. If you get back to the Hebrew of verse 4, it doesn't start with the word and, which is opposite from everything else that takes place in the Hebrew Bible. Now, why do we care? Why do we care that the word and isn't there? Almost every sentence, like I said, starts with that. So when it doesn't start with and, every other Hebrew writing, when it doesn't start with the word and, it means that it's either a beginning of a new section, so we have a new chapter, or new thought, we kind of have put it in our terms, or it's making a footnote about something that's already been written. Okay, so because in the Hebrew, we don't see verse 4 have the word and the giants were there, and the Nephilim were there. Doesn't have that there, right? It just simply says the Nephilim were there before and afterwards. I think it's making a footnote about Nephilim already being there before the sons of God came into the daughters of men and after. Okay. Now, why is this important? Okay. And am I getting boring? Is this making sense?
Yeah, man. Keep
okay.
going.
All right.
Oh,
so this is going a totally different direction than where I thought it was. So I am super intrigued right now. I'm in it. I'm in it.
So what I think the writer of Genesis is doing, I think it's Moses. I think he is trying to mythologize, right? The mythology of the Nephilim, men of renown. I think he is trying to deconstruct their mythology. So he doesn't tell us who the Nephilim are, doesn't write anywhere in there, because the people who are reading this kind of already know that. So he purposely doesn't give them any type of credit or talk about the great things or not so great things they were doing, because again, the first readers would have already known. So what Moses is doing by just simply saying the Nephilim were here and afterwards, he's simply saying that heroes like Gilgamesh, the other ones of the known that you've read about, that you know, aren't these mythological creatures, whoever they were be, they aren't a part of this story, right? They don't come from the cohabitation of angels and humans. Okay, they're not part of this. That's why we see nothing mentioned more about it. Moses doesn't really talk much about it, because he's wanting his reader to know that they're not the product of these things, because they're not even part of the story. They were here before the sons of God came down to these women. Then they're here after. So they're nowhere in this narrative. Okay. And the problem here is that I think that when talking about the Nephilim, especially in interpretations of it translated in the second and third BCE, where the Book of Enoch was written, I think they messed some stuff up. Okay, again, I'm giving you Lanciism, right? I'm just giving you my theory. I think they messed some things up in the interpretation. When they said that the Nephilim, being giants, as said in the second and third BC, were products of this meeting, and that eventually made its way into the Book of Enoch, right? I think the interpretation of that was wrong altogether. Now, why do you think that? Okay, let's go back to Paul, right? Or we'll go to Paul now. Paul writes in 1 Timothy, so we're just going to take the New Testament, let's connect it to the Old Testament because we use the Bible as a historical piece of evidence, okay? He writes in 1 Timothy chapter 1 and in chapter 4, he says specifically, don't argue over the endless genealogies and the foolish myths that you read. Now, Justin, being a person who has read and looked at the Book of Enoch, what is the Book of Enoch full of?
It's mythology.
And it's got a whole list of the genealogy of angels.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's got a whole thing of the genealogy of angels, and it's got all this mythology as well. Paul is taking a direct shot by referencing the Book of Enoch, which Peter did too, and so did Jude, but he's taking a direct shot at it because it goes through this genealogy of angels, and it goes all the way down to the end. And the last portion of the genealogy is Satan, right? That's the last member of the genealogy of angels. And then what the Book of Enoch does, and this is really cool, okay? Now I'm going to get a little churchy for a second. What the Book of Enoch does is that it takes all of the evil in the world and blames it on this unholy union, right? So it takes all of the evil in the world and blames it on Satan. Okay, now, of course, Satan's the devil. He's an evil person. Evil stems from him. I agree with you, and I would agree with that. But what the Book of Enoch is trying to do is blame all the chaos, all the death, all the evil in the world, blaming it on the angelic sin of them coming down to the daughters of men, instead of blaming all the chaos, death, craziness of the world on human sin, right? Because all throughout scriptures, taking it at face value, over and over and over and over again, Old Testament, we see with the Israelites, they screw stuff up, they're wrong, their sin causes bad stuff to happen. Christ comes, the New Testament, because our sin is going to cause bad stuff to happen, right? So when Jude refers to this sin that he references in the Book of Enoch and even references it, but this Genesis chapter 6 communion of the sons of God and daughters of men, of all this rebellion, he always refers to human sin, not angelic sin. Okay. So that is why I think that the Nephilim were here before this union even took place. Now, I think they were giants. I think they were men of renown, all these things. I think that the Goliath was a direct descendant from these Nephilim that you read about. The giants that
Raphaim.
The Raphaim, the story you told about Bigfoot, and it's an episode of Appalachian Intelligence, we got to talk about Bigfoot. So the story that you all had about Bigfoot, the Bigfoot Wars, and the Native Americans who were larger, right? There's a whole thing you can trace the Nephilim right back to the Native Americans and some of them being really tall warriors. Matter of fact, some of the chiefs, they think, some of the really powerful Powhatan and the Cherokee nations and the Sioux that were living there in the Midwest, they've traced, somebody has traced their line back to the Nephilim. So I'm fully in agreement that they were giants. They were all these people. They were men of renown. Gilgamesh was probably a Nephilim. Nimrod was probably a Nephilim as well. But I do not think that it came from the union of the sons of God and daughters of men.
Okay. So then what do you think came from that union?
Well, that is the age-old question, Justin. Because if you continue to go into scripture and look, every time we see that reference, like we have talked about, I think that was an event that caused or happened, that when we began to see the complete and total moral decay of humanity, that God saw it and saw that nobody was righteous and had to destroy the world with the flood. I think that was because of the unholy union between the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. I think the Nephilim also were involved in the bad morality, the amoral things that were taking place. I think it was a culmination of both of those things that caused God to send the flood to the earth, right? So, I mean, sons of God are probably Nephilim, they were probably working with genetics, right? The things that they were doing all the bad things that were happening that we know of, you could possibly think of. I think it was not just the offspring. I think it was both of them were contributing to evil in the world at the time.
That's awesome, man.
Okay. I see.
You sold me on
I
the
see what you're saying
Nephilim
here.
weren't the product of that. You sold me on that.
Yeah, I just think if you could just, it's just there's never a common. Now there's a guy named Michael Hauser, or Heiser, I guess, who uses the Book of Enoch a lot in other scriptures as well. Justin, I think you have looked at him more than I have. Does he think the Nephilim were the product of this union?
I actually, the same day that I messaged you and said, check out Dr. Michael Heiser, was the very same day that I started checking out Heiser.
I've got Unseen Realms ordered. It's coming tomorrow.
Good deal. I have it ordered as well. And I really just started checking him out because, we talked to Ward. Ward was quoting Heiser and talking about all this. And it seemed like everything that I was listening to for the next couple days was everybody was mentioning Heiser.
Yeah, gotcha.
But I like the take that I like this little Lanceism. I like the take on that because honestly, it's not one you hear very often at all. And Ryan can tell you, this is something that I've spent quite a bit of time into and researching and hearing almost every differing view and opinion out there on this. And that's one that you don't actually, I don't know if I've ever heard it in that particular way. So for that, kudos. That's really good. That's really good. And it's going to give me something to think about.
And listen, for the longest time, I've been in church since I was like 4 days old, right? And I could count on my hands the number of Sundays I've missed. For the longest time, I was kind of convinced that, of course, in Nephilim, of course, they came down and they had all the, it was the angel, you got angelic DNA and you've got human DNA, and it just makes sense that they're giants and all these things. But the more you look at the way that the context of things are written and get into the grammatical spacing of how stuff is, it just doesn't kind of add. I don't think it adds up. Now, I could be totally wrong. And I've been totally wrong before. I just don't think it adds up in the way that it's written in scripture. Now, this is what I do think the Nephilim did. Okay. I think they were men of renown. I think Gilgamesh was a Nephilim. Okay. I think that Nimrod was a Nephilim. Okay. And Nimrod is mentioned in Genesis chapter 10. He's like the first great mighty king there that kind of happens after the flood. Nimrod builds a Tower of Babel, right? He's the guy that he's the guy that does that, right? He was a mighty hunter. Most people think that he wasn't hunting game; he was hunting people. But the old Sumerian conversations about him that you can see a lot of similarities to Gilgamesh. They kind of think Nimrod or Gilgamesh probably based off of Nimrod. I think he was a Nephilim, right? And from Nimrod, I told Justin we were going to get into this because as much as I like the Nephilim in Genesis 6, Nimrod is a character that's just, I think Nimrod, again, this is another Lanceism, Ryan, so you can stop me anytime and tell me I'm a crazy person. But I think Nimrod,
you're both nuts.
I think that Nimrod started the occult. And the shadow person that followed Justin around for a while. I remember that happening, by the way. I was one of those guys that thought he was crazy. Now, I wasn't up there when he talked with the other guy on Bo, the Bump podcast. I wasn't there for that experience, but I remember telling him that this is crazy. This is crazy because I grew up like people don't get haunted by ghosts.
How how in depth did I go for like a few weeks at school? That's all I was researching, man.
Was
like
consumed.
I was trying to find out.
I was legitimately, I was
Ryan.
Ryan. I was worried about him. Like I thought having Connor had cracked him. Like,
I'm still worried about him. That's
I thought it had just completely cracked him. I thought he was done for. But now hearing that story,
maybe it did. Maybe it did.
Maybe it did. Knowing all that stuff was going on, like in my mind, I was like, that's it. If it's first of all, it's probably not real. But if it is real, it's a demon. Leave it alone. Like don't mess with it. Like there's no such thing as ghost. It's got to be a demon. Don't mess with it. So
why didn't you tell me that then?
No, I don't. You know, I don't. That's a good question. But back to what I was saying. I think Nimrod started the occult. Okay, and I think that you can trace Nimrod and Nimrod's wife. Let me pull up her name right here real quick, just because it's important. It's valuable to what we're doing here. But you can trace Nimrod and his wife, which Semiramis, the mother of the harlots. I'm not pronouncing it right, I'm sure.
I was going to say, no, I can't see Uranus.
But most stories about her say that she was not only was she Nimrod's wife, but also his mother. Okay, but that totally beside the point. She was the first goddess that was worshipped. She was the first goddess that was worshipped. Okay, now we go back to what Ward said last week. If you haven't listened to that episode, you need to go back and listen to it. He talks about in that dark holler about the man dressing up like a woman and referred to herself as what? Lilith, right? Okay. You can trace the demon or demoness, I guess, if you want to call it that, Lilith, all the way back to the Greek, back to Rome, back to Babylon, back to Samaria, some Sumerians, back to Babel. And you can see that Lilith is just another rendition of Nimrod's wife. So I think Nimrod started the occult. Okay. And I think that is where, and that was one of the reasons God had to split people up at Babel, because they were doing some stuff that was unsavory, not just person to person, but they were getting into the supernatural. I think the principalities and powers that's talked about in the New Testament being over the different dominions and having the spiritual warfare that you all have talked about. And all this, I think all of it started at Babel, as we know. I think it was always there. It's always been there. But as far as we know it and experience it, it started at Babel. It started because Nimrod started the occult. Okay, he had antediluvian knowledge that he pulled from the Book of Enoch. He was if there's evidence, he was the first Mason. He came up with the 7 sacred sciences, which gives us the 7 tenets of the occult as we know it now. We have the post-diluvian 7 sciences, the Book of Rolls. He was the first king ever to wear a crown. He saw it somewhere, and one of his blacksmiths fishing him. There's stories and legends that go back that he was the first king to put a crown on, and just because he liked it and wanted it done. He was in the Jewish text, the Midrash Abar, which is a pretty ancient Jewish text they use a lot. He was worshiping the elements. Now you can go, there's a whole story with him talking to Abraham and having Abraham like tied up on a stake and saying, worship the fire. And Abraham said, well, if I worship the fire, then I got to worship the water because the water quenches the fire. Then he says, well, worship the water. And Abraham says, well, if I got to worship the water, then I can worship the clouds because that brings the water. He said, worship the clouds. If I worship the clouds, then I got to worship the wind because the wind pushes and they go through this whole thing, right? Where he's trying to get Abraham to worship the elements. Abraham's trying to explain to him that, as Rip said on Yellowstone, there's always a bigger bear, right? There's always a bigger bear. He was trying to explain that to him, to saying that God was the only one that needed to be worshiped. Eventually, and again, this is all in the Jewish text. It's a little bit mythology. This is a little hearsay, and you can find this written down places. This is not scripture. This is not canon stuff. This is anterior things. But there's a story that shows that Nimrod threw Abraham into the fire, And when he throws him into the fire, and it's like this fire is one that Nimrod's been collecting driftwood for 4 years, right? There's a story that Nimrod wanted to have the biggest bonfire ever, so he collected firewood for 4 years and he lit it on fire because he wanted to do the biggest one because he was the guy that could do that. He throws Abraham into that, and Abraham walks out of it scotch-free, right? And then when Nimrod looks into the fire, just like the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he looks in and sees a fourth person in there, the Son of God. That Son of God reference is the same type of reference that you see in Genesis as well, and it's the same reference that they use in the Midrash Abar. It's all the same thing, right? So you've got stories, other stories, auxiliary stories, that have Nimrod as being a character there that Abraham dealt with, and that Lot probably dealt with. They probably he was alive for quite some time. I think he was a Nephilim. I think he started the occult. I think that he is the reason for the demons that we have now presently here. I think he brought them here because of stuff he was doing at Babel. Now, Ryan, that's crazy sounding, right? I mean, that sounds like that's out there. But I think that if you look into the occult and where it got its start in the 7 sacred sciences that pretty much governed what Egypt did and what Babylon did when Nebuchadnezzar was there in 1 or 2 BC, all of that stems from what Nimrod did. And we can go even a little bit further. I mean, if you want to get into some more paranormal stuff, like I think the gods that were the little g gods, the spirits who were there in the occult, right? They knew they had about a 400-year window that God was going to stamp on the head of the serpent when Adam and Eve fell in Genesis. They knew they had like a 400-year window to do as much harm as they could. They got ran out of Babel. I think they went down to Egypt. Right? We're talking supernatural gods here. These demons went down to Egypt. That's why Egypt became the power that it did. That's why God sent Joseph to Egypt. And then the Israelites eventually get to Egypt, right? God didn't want them to stay there. He wanted them to go to Canaan, the promised land. They didn't want to because they liked where they were at. They're having spiritual warfare. God sends the 10 plagues to get them out. He didn't send them at Pharaoh. He's sending them at the gods that were in Egypt to let them know he was in charge. Right? I think all of that stems from Babel. I think all that comes from the Nephilim. They created all this thing. I think the Nephilim, the giants, spiritual stuff. I think the sons of the evilness of the sons of God led into this as well. Had other genetic things going on. They were doing, genetic eugenics. They were doing genetic modification on things. I think all that stuff was happening. That's why I think they're so bad, right? And that's why God had to restart stuff. So I'm fully convinced that Justin's shadow person was because of Nimrod in Genesis chapter 10.
Way to go, Nimrod.
Thanks a lot, Nimrod. Thanks a lot, Nimrod.
It makes sense knowing Justin, right? I bet that his demon was called Nimrod. And that's why he's following Justin around.
I did hear
what? Actually, my dad did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've heard Don say that a couple
My
times.
dad did go around saying Nimrod a whole lot. Maybe he was talking to this demon Nimrod. I thought it was me this whole time.
He summoned him. Good Lord.
Way to go, Dad. Way to go.
I did hear a pretty interesting theory about the Tower of Babel, and the reason Nimrod had it built was because he feared another flood.
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that one.
And I thought, that kind of makes sense.
It totally makes sense. Because what kind of stories were they passing down? That was the most present danger. Was going to be another flood, obviously.
Yeah, and I was listening, but at that point in time, I was listening to a podcast. I'm not going to say the name because I don't want to trash another podcast. But these guys, good heavens, they don't wear tinfoil hats. They wrap their Kevlar helmets in tinfoil hats, and like he's talking about he has new neighbors. I just went and got him some walkie-talkies, and all this. So he does that for all of his neighbors.
That's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that?
If I had a neighbor, I've just moved into an area, and he brings me here, man. Just take these walkie-talkies. You never know, the apocalypse is coming. We'll be able to stay in touch. We'll get help and all this. like, this guy's bugged these. He's gonna like spy on us through these. No, he's nuts. They were nuts. They were insane.
I can imagine. There's some real crazies out there.
It was really hard to get through that whole podcast because I was like, oh man, they never came back out of the rabbit hole.
Since we're diving in a little bit in the crazy right now, let's dive a little deeper. So, Lance, with all this that you believe about the Nephilim, with Nimrod starting the occult, the beginnings there, do you believe that there's possibly still bloodlines of Nephilim today that may be in higher power, higher authority, or operating, maybe calling the shots today?
Absolutely. Yep. Yes, I do. And I don't know that, and I'm not sure. Are you talking like in the physical, like in our like human bloodline, like people in charge of stuff?
Well, I think either. I think
about the freaking cabal.
I think we know.
Is that what you're talking about? Trump's got you
I'm
believing.
talking
in the cabal.
about
Is that
whatever,
what you're talking about?
whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it. Illuminati, cabal, shadow government.
Drinking adrenochrome and talking.
Well, now that's debatable. That's debatable. But I do firmly believe that there is a group out there, and I believe that there are principalities, I will say, that are influencing these certain people and these certain groups into using the world and using the people of the world and using the governments of the world like a chessboard, that they are already 3 and 4 moves ahead of what we think or expect to be going on. And I believe that's how they operate. I believe that it's like
when you say like principality, are you talking like a spiritual realm of Nephilim bloodline, or are you talking like actual like people bloodline?
I'm talking actual physical. Now, I believe that's what I'm saying is I believe that there is a spiritual side that is influencing, because we know that. Okay, I'm talking more about a physical bloodline. Like, okay, you look back at the Nephilim, like we were just talking about. You see them mentioned throughout the Old Testament. You see like Og, all these kings. You even look at examples of some of the pharaohs, how their faces were this long pointed chin and these kind of serpent-like features of their face, and these things were described in that way sometimes, in certain accounts.
No, Justin, I don't think that there are lizard people in the government.
Oh, thank God you said it. I was like, he's going to talk about lizard people.
No, that's not where I'm going with this. If you look at some accounts of people talking about the Nephilim, they talk and explain them to be serpent-like features sometimes. Okay. Some of them had red hair, some had blonde hair, blue eyes, hazel. That's neither here nor there. What I'm asking is, we see all throughout the ancient Sumerian kings list, the rulers in the Old Testament, some of the pharaohs have been described. A lot of them have been described at great height, as giants. So if these Nephilim were putting people in a place then in royalty or to lead, do you believe that bloodline is still kind of there today? And maybe some of the people that are in power are still parts of these bloodlines.
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, it's definitely, the problem is for us, right, is that we have ideas on what the Nephilim are, who they are, what they were, but we really don't have any concrete evidence that we can go to. Right? If we could go back and talk to somebody, just, if we could go back and talk to Lance and Ryan and Justin living around the Tower of Babel, just regular old guys just helping carry rocks up the top of whatever the case may have been, slapping on mortar. If we can go and talk to those guys and ask them what they think the Nephilim are, we're going to have a much better description or understanding of what they are. Then we could probably trace that down through history and say, yeah, we can point at this, and this, these people, these, groups of people, whatever. I think it's a real possibility that the Nephilim are probably still have a bloodline that's there. Because I think that at the substance of them, I think it's evil. I don't think it's good, right? I think the Nephilim, every time you see them in any light or any type of story, we don't see them like helping people, right? We don't see them like building farms, and we don't see them like, helping widows or doing any. We always see them, even in mythological stories, they're always conquering and battling and winning, and they're always doing unsavory things to get what they need. I think it's all stems from evil, right? I think the same thing when the sons of God came down and had the unholy union with that offspring, whatever that was, it was evil, and it worked in congruence with the Nephilim to push more evil on the world. So yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's probably some type of link. I don't think it's lizard people walking around like Congress, but I mean, I think that there's probably some type of link that, and I'm more under the impression that the principalities, the spiritual realm that we don't see, but we have evidence of, right? There's always battling going on there. And we know there's principalities and powers over regions. That's in scripture. It talks about that. There's a demon, let's put it really simple terms. There's a head demon in charge of North America, right? There's a head demon in charge of South America. There's a head, however that hierarchy may work. We don't know exactly what it is. We know that's in place. I think those are using their influence over the different areas to get things done, to try to avoid people from doing good and winning people to God. So yeah, I'm sure there are a links of some type of the Nephilim that's causing division and stuff going on today. Ron, what do you think? You're being a little quiet on us over there. What do you think?
I just think that people can be pretty shitty, and it's just people being really shitty and abusing power that they shouldn't be able to abuse, and that's what I think. I think
boring.
Yeah, you're right. They're probably lizard people. Let's just give up, never vote again, because we don't stand a chance. Those guys have been around since the dawn of time. Good God.
I'm glad you're finally coming around, Ryan. That's the smartest thing I've ever heard you say.
Let me ask you this, Ryan. This is another interesting conversation just I've had a couple times. Before the flood, okay, we know God sent the flood. We can have a discussion. We can have another argument if you want to about it being a worldwide flood or a regional flood or a local flood. It's a whole other conversation. There's a flood that definitely happened, right? It's in not just the Bible. There's other texts. Every society essentially has a flood story. Before the flood, though, right? If you look at the time period, and again, I'm the staunch Christian. Believe my Bible as being the truth, read it from a dispensational point of view. What it says is what it means. So there, with that being said, that means I think the world is about 7,000 or 8,000 years old, right? That's kind of my beliefs. So with that being said, I'm coming from the time of creation of Genesis 1 to the flood that happened in Genesis 8, 7, wherever it's at.
I think it's 7.
I should know that off the top of my head. I don't.
Yeah,
not being a very good defender here of the scriptures, Ryan. Anyhow, as he's looking that up, I think that time frame, that about 4,000 years, okay, is the same amount of time from post flood to now, give or take a couple hundred years. Not exactly 7. Yeah, give or take a couple hundred years. So I think it's about 4,000 years that people were running around here on Earth before the flood. And there's been about 4,000 years afterwards. And again, that's not the exact numbers. So we think about the technology that we have gained in 4,000 years, right? When Noah walked off the boat, it was caveman time. right? They were making fire with whatever they could make fire with. And eventually things obviously got better and got better and got better. And now we're kind of where we're at now, where we're having this conversation via Zoom, right? Pretty cool that we can do that. I think that what we're doing now, the people before the flood were doing that too, Ryan. Let me tell you why.
I knew it.
Let me tell you why.
I knew that's what you were going to say. I knew it.
Let me tell you why I think that. You got people there who were living per the script, per the Bible. We got living for a long, long time, hundreds of years. They were not very far removed from Adam and Eve, who were made perfect. So their DNA was a whole lot better than our DNA, right? It hasn't had 8,000 years of digression because of, get in a whole nother discussion about why we're digressing, because the fall of man and sin has caused all this stuff. They didn't deal with that in the same capacity that we have. So we've got people who are living a lot longer than we are. Their DNA a lot better than ours are, working together with no real sickness, no major anything causing, that would cause them to die. So we've got people so essentially you've got some of our smartest people ever that we can think of in human history. Einstein, right? Stephen Hawking, Galileo. We could go on the list of those people. You've
Neil
got
deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. You can have all those type. You got hundreds of those types of people living for a
Alex
whole
Jones,
living for a whole lot longer, working together. I think that they have even more technology than we have now. I think they were flying spaceships around. I think they had planes. I think they had YouTube. I think they had the internet. I think they had all this stuff. And I think the reason why we have no evidence for it, the more digital that we get in our society, the less manuscripts of things, physical things we leave behind, right? Absolutely. We're putting stuff on servers and getting rid of paper copies. I teach high school chemistry. I haven't made a copy. When I first started teaching 13 years ago, I made a lot of copies. Now things have gone completely digital because of using stuff like Google Classroom. I don't make any copies anymore. Everything's online, right? If you have everything online and it gets completely wiped out, there's nothing left over for us to find. That's why we haven't found anything. So I think, Ryan, this is my crazy corner, right? I think that the people before the flood were flying planes. They probably had spaceships. They're probably orbiting Earth. They probably visited Mars and the moon. Like all the things that we're trying to do, they've already done. Let me tell you why I think that before you give me that look like you're crazy. Okay. Let's go back to when we first initially started this conversation. I said, let's take the Bible and use it as a historical document. I think everything in it's true. I think if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, got to be a duck interpretation of it. 15 or 20, maybe 30 times in the Song of Solomon and Ecclesiastes, the writer says, there is nothing new under the sun. Now, what's the one thing that's always been here for the earth? From the original creation of the earth, what is the one thing that's always been here? The sun, right?
The sun.
The sun's always been here. It was here. It's always been here, right? The sun has seen everything the earth has done. Hey, that was good. You ain't write that one down. The sun has set us down. The sun has seen everything the earth has done, right? So he says there is nothing new under the sun.
that was
right?
really good.
A bunch of times. So Elon Musk Cybertruck is really cool, but it's been done before. Like Virgin Mobile guy, him flying to space, Bezos and his guns flying around in his penis-looking spaceship running around up there. Yeah, I mean, it's all been done before, I think.
All right, church it up. It's phallical shaped.
I think all of it's been done. And I don't think we've even touched the surface yet of what was actually going on before the flood.
So first, I think my only rebuttal to that would be is Noah, his sons and wives and wife and all that would have the knowledge of all that. And I think they would have passed that knowledge on, and we would have had electricity, planes, trains, and all that long before we ever did.
They may have had the knowledge, they didn't have the resources because everything changed. Right? It was nothing was the same. Right? Once they got off the boat and the water subsided, again, I'm a worldwide flood guy. I don't think it was regional. I think there's definitely an argument for being regional. You look at scriptures, you can say that what the known world they were writing was much smaller than, but I think everything changed. I think absolutely everything changed. They may have had the knowledge, that didn't have the resources. And I think that's why they had to go back to, then God wanted a reset. He wanted a great reset. And I think he made him reset.
And for nothing new under the sun, everything we're talking about as far as technology, all that is man-made. Nothing can be made unless it first comes from the imagination and forms a thought. So technically, man, when he was under the sun, had thought, could interpret the imagination, do things. So technically everything here is just a thought. So it isn't new under the sun, even though it may be new, like the Cybertruck, all that. Technically it all comes down, it starts right there and then comes out.
I really like that, Ryan. That was actually really good. But I
It
will
came to me, by the way.
That was really good. I like that. But I mean, I'm not taking your side on this. I just want to let you know that was good.
Oh. Well, damn.
Here's my thing. I'm kind of with Lance on this one, because he said something that I want to point out. Everything changed. The earth had changed. And by that, like really, really changed, like a completely new earth. You know, it had not rained before this. Like the everything was, I'm struggling to put this the way I want to put it.
No.
Your levels of everything would be so different. You get what I'm saying? So maybe even the resources that they did have before, if they came off the ark with the knowledge of, hey, this is what we need, this is what we need, this is what we need. Okay, well, if there was a mine, say for instance, where they had to obtain I don't know, whatever this technology stuff is made out of, well, it wasn't there anymore. And who knows how much the earth had shifted, how different parts and areas and things that they may have needed had shifted or been completely covered up, or, you know, all of these different things. So then it becomes a whole new thing of how do we find the resources that we once had, even though we have the technology or we have the ideas for these technologies. How do we get it? That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, makes sense.
I just had a really funny thought of, if that's true, and Noah and his wife and their sons and their grandchildren, all that, he entered onto a wooden ark that took 120 years to build.
I don't think it did.
I think technology would have built that a little bit faster, but I can just imagine them all like nowhere to plug their cell phones in. This is why Noah turned to drinking. He was playing Candy Crush, the phone died. That's it. It's never coming on again.
Dang it. That's why Ham got cursed.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan, you said something. I don't think it took you 120 years to build the ark.
I thought that's what they say. Or was it he was 120? No, he was 400 something, right?
Yeah, it doesn't say it took you. It doesn't say anywhere that takes them 120 years to. But I think the ark was done.
I swear I heard that.
No, it was. No, it was there for, like, it was the scripture says something like it was 120 years from the time that God first gives him the command to build it to when the rains came. I think it's kind of how it is worded. Justin, you looking that up?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it right now.
I think the ark was done in probably 6 months. And I think that it sat there on that hill for 100 years. And he was trying to tell people rain's coming. And said, no, you're crazy. You built that boat for no reason. And he was, no, rain's coming. No, you're crazy. I'm telling you guys, rain's coming. God said, he's destroyed it. Now you're crazy. It's been 100 years and nothing's happened, Noah. I think that was not only, it was a test of Noah's faith. And two, it was just a chance for people to believe him. Like maybe just one person. Because I really knew if one person would just be like, all right, maybe it's going to rain. Like God probably going to let him on the ark too. But nobody did that. I think that's how far people had fallen. That's another Lanceism, right? That may be completely out of left field. That's just a theory that I have. I think it was done pretty quick, and it just sat there for a long time. And here's another thing too. This is a thought I've had while just looking that up. Say I'm in Noah's time, and I see the ark being built, and I think it's never rained. It's not going to rain. I'm not going to listen to anything this man says. But like, if I'm Noah's neighbor, and these animals start walking by my house. You know what I'm saying? And just all of a sudden walking up on this ark, just all in order 2 by 2. Like I'm probably gonna go talk to Noah, be like, hey, what's going on here? Like, how's this elephant? These elephants just all of a sudden just show up and go. Why is this happening? I think that would have been the moment where I'm like, okay, maybe something else is going on here. But I think again, let's bring this full circle. I think because of the unholy union of the sons of man, or the sons of God and the daughters of men, and the Nephilim, things had gotten so bad, obviously, that nobody even thought about God or righteousness in any way. I think that was part of the work they were doing.
Hey, do you think their kids ate Tide Pods too?
Absolutely.
Did they get that stupid?
Bunch of stupid idiots, absolutely. They couldn't see a couple dinosaurs walking up on the ark and them not figuring out something was going on. They weren't eating Tide Pods. They were probably butt chugging them.
I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I'm not finding it. I'm just finding instructions. I
know
there's
nowhere where it says it took him. I'm almost positive. There's nowhere.
It took him 120 years. I think what Ryan is
from the moment he told him to build it, the rain came.
Well, I think what Ryan is referring to right there, it's right before that is right back in the Genesis 6 thing when God says, my spirit will only abide with man for 120 years. And then like directly after that, it starts talking about the instructions for the ark in Genesis 7. So that's probably where that 120 year mark ties in. And I actually thought that there was something there too that said how long it took, but just a quick glance, and that's just me trying to stay in conversation here and quickly glance. But
I don't think
I wasn't seeing anything there.
But yeah, I'm full belief.
Okay,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I've just got a ton of questions because this conversation, literally, from what I thought this conversation was be, it took a complete 180. So everything. Like I've got a lot to think about now and a lot to study up on. And I appreciate that because number one, I love to constantly be learning and I will die on no hill except for my faith in Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. 100%.
But I think that's the important thing here. You know, we can talk about all these different things and we can try to dissect the Bible and scripture as long as we stand concrete in the gospel and what it means. I think it's okay to dive deep into all this other stuff, but that's neither here nor there. It gives me a lot to think about. It gives me a lot to study back up on, but it's having all these questions are coming in my brain because I'm trying to piece all this together for myself now. And hopefully the listeners out there are doing the same thing. Okay. So we have the Nephilim before the sons of God, fallen angels.
Yep.
See the daughters of man, find them beautiful, lust after them, and bear children that we don't know really what were or what happened of to these daughters of man.
Correct.
Okay, so the Nephilim they're there before. a flood destroys, wipes out everything. And just like we said earlier, we know that giants are mentioned all throughout the Old Testament. You know, we know that from the line of Canaan, the grandson of Noah, you know, a lot of these tribes, the Canaanites, the Amorites, a ton of them. There's a ton of these tribes that are mentioned in conjunction with giants. Okay. So my question is do you believe that the members of Noah's family had giant DNA? If they were on the earth after, then the only thing that I could think was they had to have.
Ham's wife. I think it was Ham's wife.
So do you think that's why possibly that when you look at scripture and Noah's working in the field and he strips off his clothes because it's super hot and he gets drunk and he passes out in the tent, and Ham comes up on him and sees his really, really, really super old dad butt naked. And he goes to his brothers, Shem and Japheth, and says, hey guys, dad is butt naked out here. Check this out. And them being good, loyal sons go to Noah, and Noah curses Ham, right? Am I close right here?
There's some,
do you think
a couple of things that might have happened, but yeah, that you've hit it. That's good enough. Yes, that's a good way to put it.
I mean, I'm really paraphrasing here. Really,
bullet points, Lance. Bullet points.
This is Justin's speech. This is called brain vomit.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Speaking of,
so with that, do you think that there was a little bit more, maybe possibly, behind? Because I was actually looking at this today and pondering and thinking on this. Do you think there might have been a little more behind this? It says in scripture that Noah cursed Ham for that incident. Do you think that might have been this genealogy, this DNA, this Noah knows what was before, and he sees and knows what Ham's wife is, because he had to have, right? If they were carrying this DNA, they had to be different. Do you think that might have been a little bit of the reasoning behind it?
I mean, Noah may not have known that Ham's wife had this DNA, right? I mean, think about this. Like, do you think just in our family lines, how many times do you have certain traits that are like 3 or 4 generations skipped, and then it pops up in one of the kids? It happens all the time.
Gingers.
Like gingers. You have those recessive traits. That happens all. That's common, right? That happens all the time.
Nasty little buggers.
But that's a really common thing, especially in humans. Like, that's a really common thing to happen. Like, you'd have a great granddaughter that looks like nobody else, but you go back 3 or 4 generations and she looks like the grandmom on the mom's side, right? I mean, there's that kind of stuff happens all the time. So I'm not saying that was the case, but that's a plausible, that gives you plausible cause to saying the DNA was probably still there. It was always there. It may have just laid dormant for a couple of generations, right? And we know that once God told them to be fruitful and multiply, and they multiplied, quickly. And then there's all kinds of things things that happen. Of course, they're living a lot longer too than we were, but that could have laid dormant for a couple, or they could have known, right? They could have known, or it could have been. And there's a whole list of possibilities, but my thought is that's why Ham did what he did. That's why he got cursed, because the Nephilim at its core is evil. The offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men is evil. God's all powerful. Satan's still pretty powerful and still got a plan and still trying to thwart things, right? He is trying constantly all the way up to the resurrection of Christ, right? He was always trying to defeat the plan. He didn't get defeated. He doesn't get beaten until Christ is raised again. Right? That's the blow. That's the one that does him in. From that point on, he's just dealing with Christians and trying to keep people out of heaven. Right? So he's still thinking he has a chance to win. And I think that was one of his, in this big game of chess going on, one of his moves was having that DNA in Ham's wife. And I think that's why Noah cursed him. I think that's why Ham did what he did, because there was some underlying evil there. And that was the curse that came. Now, there's a ton of studies. You can go any Google search any you want to, of people who have done genealogies, 23andMe, all that stuff, right? In our DNA, in the mitochondrial DNA, there are every person on Earth has one of 3 markers in their DNA. Now, the evolutionary geneticists can't explain this. They don't understand why essentially every human that's on Earth right now has one of 3 markers in their DNA. Now, as people who believe Scripture, it makes total sense to us, right? One of those 3 markers is either Ham, Shem, or Japheth, right? It comes from, but like there's a ton of studies. Like you could probably right now quickly study up what are the 3 markers in people's DNA. You all kind of Stanford, Yale, they've all done studies on where these 3 markers come from, why they're there, because it's a huge blow to evolution. That they can't fully understand. They can't put a evolutionary stamp on why this happened, but they will acknowledge the existence of it. You go right to scriptures, you go to Genesis chapter 10, you see the table of nations. You can see where why each human has one of those 3 markers in their mitochondrial DNA, because we all are descendants from one of those 3 people. Same thing with the giants. They walked and talked and put pants on one leg at a time, a lot longer pants than we did. They put pants on one leg at a time, like we were a tunic or whatever it was, right? Just like we do. So their DNA comes from one of those 3 things as well. So you're asking me where it was. I think it was Ham's wife. And I think that's why Ham got cursed. And I think that's where the DNA comes from.
I was gonna say, if it was just because he found Noah passed out drunk, that's bullshit, man. Like it didn't. You went out in the field, like I was just telling the guys it was kind of funny. Dad's laying there all sprawled out, passed out in the field. Cursed his ass. And I still think of it, curse you.
Oh, man. Oh, Ryan, you got any questions for Lance?
Yes, Lance. How long have you been crazy?
As long as Justin has known me for many, many years now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. At least 20 years, at least.
Listen, we didn't I haven't even. Well, it's getting late, but I haven't even a chance to tell you my demon story. So we'll have to do that some other time, I guess.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. I think we need a part 2 on this one anyway, because I'm almost positive that I'm gonna have more questions. I actually already have more questions right now, but I feel like if I ask these questions, then it's going to be a complete other episode, and I don't think that we have time for that tonight.
Listen, I love it. Let's do it again sometime. And ask me all the questions. I probably won't have all the answers. I'll act like I do.
But man, that's the thing. Like with these things that we're talking about, nobody really knows 100%. That's the thing. Nobody knows 100%. You find these things, and there's so many different views. There's so many different opinions. There's so many different. Now there are things that are concrete in Scripture, especially. They're concrete.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yeah.
You can't argue them. Whether you believe in that biblical worldview or not. That's your decision. But if you believe in that biblical worldview, there's certain things there that are they're concrete. There's no argument. But certain things like the things that we've been talking about tonight, and what makes for great conversation, and that iron sharpening iron in understanding the context around, creation, genealogy, the story of the flood, what happened there. Those things, nothing is absolute. If you talk to 10 different scholars, each of them might have a totally different opinion on that. And that's what I love about it, is it keeps the malleability of your brain. Your brain has to have to keep that going. I mean, I love it. I love it.
And Ryan, let me ask you, what are your thoughts on all this? Other than your, we're all crazy type, but like, what's like, honestly, seriously, like, what do you think about all this?
I don't know.
You don't care? Is it not? I mean, it's not super
think,
interesting. And
I think I brought up some pretty good rebuttals.
Sure, yeah.
So, as far as the technology before, your face is. Damn it, Justin! Now I'm lost. Hold on, I lost my train of thought there. Way to go. We'll sit here in silence, Justin, until you stop. That's.
I was asking what do you? I mean, you brought up some good rebuttals about technology. What are your thoughts? I mean, you don't care about this, like, it's fun to talk about, but it's not a huge thing. Or what are your thoughts on this?
It's fun to talk about. I don't think it, it's like impacting me in any way.
Sure,
so
yeah.
It's like anything else in life. I just take it as I go. But I don't know. I like things that make you put thought into them. That's the Genesis 6 mystery, whether it's relevant or not. If it was relevant, as far as if you believe in the Bible and live that life, the Bible's a roadmap to heaven. Who cares if there were giants? That doesn't make a difference. So it's just like that was my argument with people when they'd say, well, the Bible doesn't talk about dinosaurs. It's like, well, I don't think the Velociraptor is going to help you get to heaven. So why would it be in there? It's just a roadmap, dude. It's a map. If I was drawing you a map from your house to mine, I wouldn't draw a map to Justin's and then from Justin's to here. It would just
right,
be.
Absolutely.
But as far as everything else, it's always fun to go. Now, I like conspiracies because I like going in and listening to what they have to say. And then, and not without an open mind, go into it open-minded, listen to their viewpoints. And then if I don't agree, I'll pick it apart. Because, conspiracy theories, they're fun, but they're dangerous, that's.
I think we've seen just that conspiracy theories being dangerous. And just in the last 2 years, how some of your really good friends, probably your family members, have dropped down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theory, and it just completely consumed absolutely every portion of their life.
Yeah. And it's like the rush on the Capitol. That was, that's crazy. Don't do that. And that's from everybody generating all their stories, and the election was tainted and this and that, and that's what caused that. It's conspiracy theories.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. They can be dangerous, but oh man, it's they are fun though. They are fun.
They are. I agree.
But I firmly believe that these people that do act on these and become obsessed with these things, there's already something a little off there. It's not taking a whole lot to push them over this edge, because I believe that just because you're taking in interesting ideas and information on different topics and looking into things with an open mind and something don't seem right here, I'm going to try to figure out the truth. If you act abruptly on these things, there's already something a little bit off. But I do agree with both of you guys that some of these conspiracy theories are dangerous. and have pushed and caused people to act in negative ways. So
Yeah.
I will agree with you there. But I do believe with these people, there's something already a little bit off.
Everybody's
'Cause
got a little bit crazy on. It's just how much of
Oh
it we let out there.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Some of us we let it all out. We don't care.
Yeah. You got to bottle some of that shit up, man. That's
Come on. Bottle it up and sell it. That's what I'm gonna do.
oh man, that's what you
No,
do.
man, this has been a great conversation. Man, I really don't want to end this conversation. I would like to go the rest of the night, honestly, because man, I have so much more I want to get into, but I guess that's why there's going to be
my chair's not comfy and my ass hurts. We can't do this the rest of the night.
Oh, guys, for anybody listening, sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning of this interview. Ryan, Lance, thank you guys for jumping in there and keeping it going, even though you were making fun of me in the process of doing it. Sorry about that. I got a new mic. I got a new headphones. I'm in a little different location, trying to do all this stuff. So everything was a little bit different, and it didn't quite work out the way that I
needed.
Take
a boy out of the hall, but you can't take the hall.
Other than that, you say holla at your boy.
Oh man.
Oh, Lance, man, thanks so much for coming on here tonight, dude. This has been a great conversation. I hope that the people enjoyed this as much as I have. Dude, you got anything you want to plug before we head out of here?
Nope, not really. I'm just a regular guy that's got a couple kids and gets up and goes to work every day. I don't really have anything going on. This is just in full disclosure, to be totally honest with you guys. This has been a dream for me to even though to be on a podcast. I love podcast. Like I do. It's just one of those things that I've always been a big reader. I've always been a consumer of things. But like the avenue of being able to listen to a podcast on my way to work, while I'm working out at school, at the house, working around, whatever. I've in my head I've started 45 podcasts in my head, right? I've got topics that I want to talk about and things, and just never jumped on and done it. So being able to come on with you guys has been something something I've wanted to do for many years now. So you've given me an opportunity to jump onto it. Even I was sporadic at times talking about stuff. Being able to be on and have a good time and talk to you guys, man, it's been awesome. I really enjoyed it. And I've got nothing to plug. I haven't written any books. I don't have a website. I just have my thoughts. And you heard a little bit of them today.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Man.
Well, I'm glad you got to come on.
We're
gonna have you back. This was fun. Yeah, I'll come at you guys with some theories. Oh man, I had one I was gonna tell you. Oh yeah, well, it's not a theory. It's just my personal belief. You know, maybe on another time we'll talk about it. But as much as people want to disagree with me, Justin, you and I've had this conversation.
Well, let's do it. We're here now. Let's do it.
Charles Manson.
That's random. Was a giant.
No.
Okay, what about Charles?
Spent his entire life in jail in prison because he told people to do something and never actually committed the crime.
Technically did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, he didn't tell them to do good stuff, but like he didn't technically.
How much? I mean, I could tell you to jump off a bridge if you did. I'd be like, oh shit, I was kidding, man.
I wasn't being serious. Like, I didn't think you were gonna believe me.
That's all I'd say. I didn't think they'd do it.
We're really going to have to do a deep dive into a Charles.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Well, a lot of just wrongfully accused. There's a There's a lot of those guys out there.
Absolutely.
All right, Ryan, is that all you got about Charles Manson?
That's all I got, man. I don't know.
Well, we're definitely going to have to do a deep dive Charles Manson episode because this is 2 or 3 times that his name's been brought up totally randomly. So
It's weighing heavy on
we're
a
going to have
man's
to talk
heart.
about him. It's weighing heavy on him.
Well,
Weighing
I just
heavy.
keep hearing these podcasts and they go into that stuff and I'll hear them mentioned every once in a while. And I'm like, oh man. And then I get angry. Just listening to them argue.
Oh man,
it's-
Lance, thanks. Yeah, I get it. Anyway, Lance, again, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad that we have the opportunity to be able to have a platform that, you know, we can give other people the opportunity to come on and share their thoughts and to share their theories and share their ideas and share their stories and just share life, man, because that's what I truly believe. I believe that all of us as one collective group of humans, that's what we should do, is share life together. And how better to share life together than in deep, intellectual, humorous, having a good time conversation. I mean, that's the thing. We actually we had a review on Apple Podcasts the other day, and I think what we're going to start doing, Ryan, I've been thinking about this. I think each new review that we get on Apple Podcasts, we need to give the person a shout out and maybe.
Dude, I was thinking of that on the way home from work.
Maybe read 1 or 2 of them. Well, actually, since we're talking about it, let's just go ahead and do that.
This is the longest ending to a show ever.
Yeah, it's all right. This is our show. We do what we want.
You're part of history, Lance. You're part of history.
So, come on here. Come on.
Here, I got them pulled up, Justin.
Okay, so this was a 5-star review from Rob Osborne. Rob, huge shout out to you, brother. I hope you love this episode as well. This review says, I love Appalachian Intelligence. Great podcast. Every episode just feels like I'm hanging around a fire chatting with my hometown childhood buddies. It just feels like home. Well, Rob, thank you for that. And man, that's what we're shooting for. So thanks for the review. Thanks for the rating. Anybody out there listening, please do the same. That's what we're going to start doing, is start reading off most recent reviews. And we'll go back and hit a couple the next time in a little more coordinated fashion than just off the cuff at the end of an episode. If Ryan, if you're good with that.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
Is he going to say no?
Since we already did
Justin, let's do everything you want to do.
All right. We'll officially end it now. We'll officially end it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, you can follow us on all of our socials. Though they will be in the show notes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out these beautiful faces on a screen rather than just hear these sultry voices over your ear holes. We have a support the show link in the show notes as well. If you enjoy the content, you would like to donate, please do so. If you feel led to do that. And we've also started talking about starting a Patreon. Me and Ryan are going to get together on that and find out exactly the way we want to set it up and lay it out. But when we get that going, we'll let you guys know. And hopefully we can continue to grow this thing, man. I'm loving all these conversations. I'm loving constantly learning in not only with the conversations, but preparation for these conversations. I don't want to come on here and sound like an idiot. I know Ryan don't, even though he does a terrible job of it.
I don't think he caught on, Lance.
but we hope that you guys are doing the same thing. So Lance, again, thank you so much for coming on here tonight, man.
Appreciate you guys. Let's do it again sometime.
Yep. Thanks, Lance.
All right, guys. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.
See y'all.